The bullet grazed past Meredith Ross's ear so close she felt the heat of it. And as she dove behind the overturned stagecoach, she wondered if dying here in the dust of Alta, Utah would hurt less than the way Thomas had shattered her heart 3 months ago when she found him with that saloon girl in his bed. The year was 1878, and the high mountain valley town had promised her a fresh start, a teaching position at the new schoolhouse, and distance from every man who had ever made her believe in love only to crush that belief beneath their boot heels. Now outlaws were shooting at the stagecoach because someone had been foolish enough to transport a mining payroll on the same run as innocent passengers, and Meredith pressed herself against the splintered wood, her traveling dress already ruined by dirt and her heart hammering against her ribs. "Stay down," a man's voice called out, rough and commanding, and Meredith looked up to see a cowboy taking position behind a cluster of rocks about 20 yards away. He wore a dusty brown hat pulled low, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and he moved with the kind of practiced ease that suggested he had been in situations like this before. His rifle came up smoothly, and he fired 3 shots in quick succession toward the ridge where the outlaws had taken cover. The shots were deliberate, strategic, not the wild spray of an amateur. Another passenger, an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, whimpered beside Meredith. The stage driver lay motionless near the front wheel, and Meredith's stomach turned at the sight of blood pooling in the dust. She had left Chicago 6 weeks ago, traveling by train and then by stage, putting 2,000 miles between herself and the wreckage of her life. Her mother had warned her that heading west was dangerous for a woman alone, that she should stay and marry respectable Mr. Patterson, even though he bored her to tears. But Meredith had already tried respectable. She had tried passionate too, with Thomas the journalist who wrote beautiful words but could not keep his promises. Before him, there had been William, who gambled away his inheritance and hers. Before William, there had been Charles during her teaching days in Philadelphia, who left her at the altar for a woman with a larger dowry. The cowboy fired again, and one of the outlaws cried out. "That got him," someone shouted from the rocks. There were at least 3 other men defending the stage, Meredith realized, including a man in a suit who looked entirely out of place with his fine clothing now covered in dirt. The suited man was reloading a pistol with shaking hands, clearly not accustomed to gunfights. "How many are there?" The cowboy called out. "I count 5, maybe 6. Another defender answered. The cowboy nodded and shifted his position, moving with remarkable calm despite the bullets that occasionally kicked up dust near his boots. He glanced toward the overturned stage, and for just a moment his eyes met Meredith's. They were a startling gray-blue, like storm clouds over mountains, and even from this distance she could see the intensity in them. Then he looked away, focusing back on the ridge, and fired again. The gunfight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes. The sun beat down mercilessly on the mountain valley, and Meredith felt sweat trickling down her back. Mrs. Henderson was praying quietly, clutching a small Bible, and Meredith found herself wishing she had that kind of faith. She had prayed before, prayed that Thomas would be faithful, that William would stop gambling, that Charles would show up at the church. God had not seemed particularly interested in answering those prayers. Finally, the shooting stopped. The silence was sudden and absolute except for the ringing in Meredith's ears. The cowboy stood slowly, his rifle still ready, watching the ridge with narrowed eyes. "They are pulling back," he announced. "Someone must have heard the shots in town. They would not want to risk a posse coming up the road." The man in the suit stood on trembling legs. "Is everyone all right?" Meredith helped Mrs. Henderson to her feet, checking her for injuries. The elderly woman seemed shaken but unhurt. The stage driver, however, was beyond help. Two other passengers emerged from where they had taken cover, a young couple who clung to each other with wide, frightened eyes. The cowboy walked over to check the driver, then removed his hat respectfully for a moment before replacing it. "We need to get into town," he said, his voice carrying natural authority. "They might come back with reinforcements, and this is not a good place to be caught." "The horses scattered," one of the other defenders said, a rancher by the look of him. "Stage is not going anywhere." "Then we walk," the cowboy replied. "Alta is only 2 miles down the road. We can send someone back for the driver and the luggage." He looked around at the group, his gaze lingering on Meredith and Mrs. Henderson. "Can you walk that distance, ladies?" Meredith bristled slightly at the assumption that she might not be capable, but she kept her voice level. "I can walk just fine, thank you." Something that might have been amusement flickered across the cowboy's face, but he just nodded. "Good. Let us move then. Stay close together and keep alert." They set off down the road in a tight group, with the cowboy and the rancher keeping watch. The suited man introduced himself as Harold Sterling, a banker from Salt Lake City. The young couple were newlyweds named Sarah and Tom Winters, heading to Alta where Tom had a job waiting at one of the mines. Mrs. Henderson was going to visit her daughter who had recently had a baby. "And you, miss?" Mrs. Henderson asked Meredith as they walked. "What brings you to Alta?" "I am the new schoolteacher," Meredith replied. "I was hired by the town council to start classes this fall." "Oh, how wonderful!" Mrs. Henderson exclaimed. "The children will be so excited." "They have been without proper schooling for nearly a year." Meredith managed a small smile, though her nerves were still jangled from the attack. She had been so focused on escaping her past that she had not fully considered what her future in this rough mountain town might actually entail. The advertisement had said Alta was a growing community with silver mines and respectable families, but the reality looked rather different from what she had imagined. The cowboy had dropped back to walk beside them, still scanning the surrounding terrain. Up close, Meredith could see he was probably in his early 30s, with sun-weathered skin and a few days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, thin and white against his tan. His hands on the rifle were steady, competent, with calluses that spoke of hard work. "I did not get a chance to thank you," Meredith said, forcing herself to meet his eyes, "for defending us back there." He shrugged slightly. "Just doing what needed doing. You handled yourself well. Like you have been in gunfights before." "A few," he admitted. "Comes with the territory out here." He paused, then added, "Name is Kade Emerson. I run a small ranch about 5 miles outside Alta." "Meredith Ross. I am the new schoolteacher as Mrs. Henderson just extracted from me." "I heard." There was that flicker of amusement again. "You picked an interesting day to arrive." "It seems I have a talent for poor timing," Meredith said, more bitterly than she intended. Kade glanced at her with curiosity but did not pry. They walked in silence for a while, the heat pressing down on them. Meredith's dress was entirely ruined, she was certain, and she probably looked like something that had been dragged through the dirt. Her carefully pinned hair was coming loose, and her face felt gritty with dust. This was not the dignified arrival she had imagined when she accepted the teaching position. Alta came into view around a bend in the road. A collection of wooden buildings sprawled across the valley with mountains rising dramatically on all sides. The town was larger than Meredith had expected, with a proper main street, numerous storefronts and houses spreading up the hillsides. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could see people moving about their business. It looked almost civilized, which was both reassuring and somehow disappointing at the same time. Their bedraggled group, attracted immediate attention as they walked down the main street. People stopped to stare, and a man wearing a sheriff's badge came hurrying over, his weathered face creased with concern. "What happened?" he demanded. "We heard shots up the road." "Outlaws hit the stage about 2 miles out," Kade reported. "Driver is dead." "They were after the mining payroll, I expect. They rode off when we held them off, but they might try again," the sheriff swore under his breath. "How many?" "5 or 6. I winged one, maybe 2. I will get a posse together." The sheriff looked at the passengers. "Anyone else hurt?" They all shook their heads, and the sheriff nodded grimly. "Get yourselves to the hotel and get cleaned up. I will need statements later." He clapped Kade on the shoulder. "Good work holding them off, Emerson." Kade just nodded, and the sheriff strode away, already calling out names of men for his posse. Meredith stood on the dusty street, suddenly feeling very lost and alone. She had nowhere to go, no one waiting for her. The town council had arranged lodging, but she had no idea where or with whom. "Miss Ross," Kade's voice broke through her paralysis. "You look a bit lost." "I am," she admitted. "I was supposed to be met by someone from the town council, but obviously that did not happen." "That would probably be Mayor Hutchins. His office is just down the street." Kade gestured with his chin. "Come on, I will walk you over." Meredith wanted to say she could find it herself, but the truth was she appreciated the guidance. They left Mrs. Henderson at the hotel with the Winters couple and Harold Sterling, and Kade led her down the wooden sidewalk to a building marked with a sign that read, "Mayor and Town Council." Inside, a heavy-set man with impressive mutton chops looked up from a desk piled with papers. His face brightened when he saw them. "Kade, good to see you, and you must be Miss Ross. We have been expecting you on today's stage." "The stage was attacked," Kade said simply. "Driver is dead and the coach is overturned up the road." Mayor Hutchins's face fell. "My God." "Is everyone else all right?" "Shaken but unhurt," Meredith confirmed. "Mr. Emerson and several others defended us." "Thank heavens for that." The mayor stood and came around his desk. "Miss Ross, I cannot tell you how sorry I am that your arrival in Alta was marred by such violence." "Please sit down. You look like you could use some water." He bustled about, pouring water from a pitcher, and Meredith sank gratefully into a chair. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she felt exhausted and shaky. Kade remained standing, though he accepted water when the mayor offered it. "We have arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Paulson," the mayor explained. "She is a widow with a large house and has been taking in boarders since her husband passed. Very respectable, very kind. The schoolhouse is nearly finished, just some final touches, and we expect you can begin classes in about 3 weeks." Meredith nodded, trying to focus on his words. 3 weeks to settle in, to prepare lessons, to become the person these people expected her to be. It seemed both too much time and not nearly enough. "I will take Miss Ross over to the Paulson place," Kade offered. "It is on my way." "Oh, would you? That would be wonderful, Kade, thank you." Mayor Hutchins beamed at both of them. "Miss Ross, if you need anything at all, please do not hesitate to ask. We are so pleased to have you here. The children desperately need proper education." They left the mayor's office, and Kade led the way down a side street to a neat white house with a front porch and flower boxes in the windows. It looked welcoming and safe, and Meredith felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you," she said to Kade as they stood at the front gate. "For everything. I seem to keep thanking you." "No need," he replied. He hesitated, then added, "Alta is a good town, Miss Ross. Today was unusual. Do not let it color your whole view of the place." "I will try not to," Meredith said, though she was not sure she believed it. Every place she had been had started with promise and ended in heartbreak. Why should Alta be any different? Kade seemed to sense her skepticism, but he just tipped his hat to her. "Welcome to Alta, Miss Ross. I am sure I will see you around." He walked away, and Meredith watched him go for a moment before turning to knock on Mrs. Paulson's door. A plump, pleasant-faced woman in her 50s answered, her eyes widening when she saw Meredith's disheveled state. "My goodness, dear, you must be Miss Ross. Come in, come in. What on earth happened to you?" As Meredith followed her inside, beginning to explain about the stage attack, she found herself thinking about Kade Emerson's storm-gray eyes and the quiet competence with which he had handled the crisis. Then, she firmly pushed the thought away. She had not come to Alta to think about men. She had come to rebuild her life, to find some purpose and peace. Romance was the last thing she needed. She had been down that road too many times before, and it always ended the same way. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Paulson's boarding house turned out to be comfortable and clean, with 2 other boarders, both minors who worked long shifts and kept to themselves. Mrs. Paulson herself was warm and talkative, full of stories about Alta's founding and growth, and she seemed determined to make Meredith feel welcome. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building on the edge of town, painted white with a bell tower and rows of desks inside. Meredith threw herself into preparing it for the students, arranging books, preparing lesson plans, and meeting with the parents who stopped by to introduce themselves and their children. Everyone was friendly, curious about the educated woman from the East who had come to teach their children. Meredith kept herself busy, partly because there was much to do and partly because being busy meant she did not have time to think. Not about Thomas or William or Charles. Not about the pattern of her life, the way she kept believing and kept being disappointed. Not about the fact that she was 26 years old and had nothing to show for it except a string of broken relationships and a heart that felt like worn leather, tough but cracked. She saw Kade Emerson occasionally around town. He came in every week or so for supplies, she learned, and he had a reputation as a fair man, honest and hardworking. His ranch was small but prosperous, raising cattle and horses in the mountain valley. He was polite when they crossed paths, tipping his hat and exchanging pleasantries, but nothing more. Meredith told herself she was relieved. The school term began on a crisp September morning with 23 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. They were a lively bunch, curious and energetic, and Meredith found herself genuinely enjoying the work. Teaching had always come naturally to her, and these children were eager to learn despite their rough edges and informal manners. One of her students was a girl named Emma, 10 years old with bright eyes and a quick mind. Emma often stayed after class to help clean up, and one afternoon about a month into the term, she lingered by Meredith's desk with an anxious expression. "What is it, Emma?" Meredith asked gently. "Miss Ross, my pa is wondering if you might come to dinner on Sunday. He says it is only proper to thank the teacher for all her hard work, and he makes a good roast." Meredith felt a flutter of alarm. She had been careful to keep her interactions with the families professional and somewhat distant. Dinner invitations led to personal questions, to people getting ideas about matchmaking. "That is very kind, but I would not want to impose." "Oh, it is not an imposition at all," Emma said earnestly. "Pa really wants you to come. Please, Miss Ross." It would be rude to refuse, Meredith realized, and perhaps she was being overly cautious. A simple dinner with a student's family did not mean anything. "All right, Emma, thank you. I would be happy to come." Emma's face lit up. "Wonderful. We live about 3 miles out of town, the Emerson Ranch. I will draw you a map." Meredith's heart sank. "Emerson, your father is Kade Emerson?" "Yes, madam. Do you know him?" "We have met," Meredith said faintly. She should have realized. Emma had the same gray-blue eyes, the same quiet intensity when she focused on her schoolwork. "I did not know Mr. Emerson had a daughter." "Just me," Emma said cheerfully. "My ma died when I was little, so it has just been me and Pa for years. He is the best pa anyone could have, Miss Ross. He taught me to ride and rope and everything, but he says I need proper learning too, which is why he was so happy when you came to teach." Meredith's mind was reeling. Kade Emerson was a widower raising a daughter alone. That explained the sadness she sometimes thought she glimpsed behind his competent exterior. It also complicated things in ways she did not want to examine. "I will look forward to Sunday then," Meredith managed to say, and Emma beamed at her before running off. Sunday arrived too quickly. Meredith dressed carefully in one of her better dresses, a deep blue cotton with a modest neckline and practical sleeves. She borrowed a horse from Mrs. Paulson's small stable, grateful for the riding lessons her father had insisted upon years ago in Chicago, and followed Emma's surprisingly detailed map out of town. The Emerson Ranch sat in a beautiful valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising on three sides. The house was modest but well-maintained, with a barn, a corral with horses and cattle grazing in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney, and as Meredith rode up, Emma came running out, waving enthusiastically. "Miss Ross, you came? Pa, she is here." Kade emerged from the house, wiping his hands on a towel. He wore clean trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and without his hat, Meredith could see that his dark hair had a slight wave to it. He looked younger somehow, less guarded, and when he smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, the transformation was remarkable. "Miss Ross," he greeted her, coming to help her down from the horse. "Thank you for coming. I hope Emma did not badger you too much." "Not at all," Meredith assured him, though she was acutely aware of his hands on her waist as he lifted her down, strong and steady. She was very polite about the invitation. "Come inside," Emma urged, tugging on Meredith's hand. "Pa has been cooking all afternoon." The inside of the house was surprisingly cozy, with comfortable furniture, colorful woven rugs, and books on the shelves. Meredith noticed a photograph on the mantel, a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. Emma's mother, she assumed. The kitchen smelled wonderful, rich with the scent of roasting meat and herbs. "I hope you like beef," Kade said, checking the oven. "We raise our own cattle, so we eat a lot of it." "It smells delicious," Meredith said honestly. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Kade was a good cook, the roast tender and flavorful with roasted vegetables and fresh bread. Emma chattered about school, about her friends, about the horse her father had promised to help her train. Kade was quiet but attentive, and Meredith found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. After dinner, Emma asked to be excused to feed the chickens, and Meredith helped Kade clear the dishes. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, then Kade said, "Emma talks about you constantly. You have made a real difference for her, for all the children." "They are good students," Meredith replied. "Emma is particularly bright. She could go far with proper education." "That is what I hope." Kade paused, then added, "I want better for her than just ranch life, though there is nothing wrong with ranching, but she should have choices, opportunities." "You are a good father," Meredith said softly. "She clearly adores you." "I try. It is not always easy raising a daughter alone. I worry I am not doing enough, not giving her what she needs." "You are doing more than enough," Meredith assured him. "She is confident, curious, kind to others. Those qualities come from good parenting." Kade looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made Meredith's breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but also a warmth that felt dangerous. She looked away quickly, focusing on the dishes. They finished cleaning up, and Emma returned. full of energy and questions about when Miss Ross might visit again. Kade gently reminded her that Miss Ross had a life of her own, but Emma persisted until Meredith found herself agreeing to come back in 2 weeks. As Meredith rode back to town in the gathering dusk, she felt unsettled. The afternoon had been too pleasant, too comfortable. Kade Emerson was exactly the kind of man she should avoid, honorable, hardworking, devoted to his daughter. He was the kind of man who would make her hope again, and hope was a luxury she could not afford. But over the following weeks, avoiding Kade proved impossible. Emma continued to excel in school and frequently needed small conferences about her progress. Kade came to town more often, always with a legitimate reason, but somehow their paths crossed repeatedly. They talked about books, about the town, about nothing in particular. Meredith found herself looking forward to these encounters, even as she told herself she should not. October brought the first snow to the mountains, dusting the peaks with white while the valley remained golden with autumn. The children grew restless as winter approached, and Meredith planned a harvest celebration at the school with the parents invited. It was a success, with food and games and a sense of community that warmed Meredith despite the cooling weather. Kade attended with Emma, bringing fresh apples from trees on his property. He helped set up tables and kept the fire going in the school stove, and Meredith caught herself watching him more than once. The way he laughed at something one of the other fathers said. The way he ruffled Emma's hair affectionately. The way his eyes sought Meredith out across the room, holding her gaze for just a moment too long. After everyone else had left, Kade stayed to help clean up. Emma had gone home with a friend for the evening, and the schoolhouse felt very quiet with just the two of them. "Thank you for organizing this," Kade said as they stacked chairs. "Emma had a wonderful time." "I am glad," Meredith replied. "The children work so hard they deserve some fun." Not just the children. Everyone needed this. He paused, then added, "You have become part of this community, Meredith. People care about you." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. "I care about them too," she said quietly. Kade set down the chair he was holding and turned to face her fully. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it is none of my business if you want." Meredith tensed. "What is it? Why did you really come to Alta? I know you said you wanted the teaching position, but there are teaching positions back east that pay better and are safer." "What are you running from?" The question struck too close to home. Meredith felt her defenses rise automatically. "I am not running from anything. I wanted a fresh start." "Those usually mean the same thing," Kade said gently. "Look, I am not trying to pry. I just sense that you are holding yourself apart, keeping everyone at arm's length, including me." "You are imagining things," Meredith said, but her voice sounded false even to her own ears. "Am I?" Kade took a step closer. "Because I like you, Meredith. I have tried to keep my distance because I know I come with complications. A daughter, a ranch that takes all my time, a dead wife I still miss sometimes. But I like you anyway, and I think maybe you like me too. Unless I am completely misreading this." Meredith's heart was pounding. She wanted to deny it to protect herself, but the words would not come. "Kade, I cannot what? Cannot like me, or cannot let yourself? Both, neither, I do not know." She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "You do not understand. Every time I let myself care about someone, it ends badly. Every single time. I have been broken so many times that I do not think there is anything left to break." "Then maybe I am not trying to break you," Kade said quietly. "Maybe I am trying to be something different." "That is what they all said," Meredith whispered. "And they all left anyway, or betrayed me, or disappointed me. I cannot go through that again, Kade, I cannot." "Who were they?" Kade asked. "Who hurt you so badly that you are afraid to even try?" Meredith laughed bitterly. How much time do you have? There was Charles, who left me at the altar. William, who gambled away everything we had and then some. Thomas, who swore he loved me while sleeping with another woman, and those are just the notable ones. There were others, smaller heartbreaks, smaller betrayals. I am 26 years old, and I have nothing to show for it except a very clear understanding that I am terrible at choosing men. Kade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Or maybe you just had bad luck. That does not mean you always will." Bad luck? Meredith shook her head. 3 times is bad luck. More than that is a pattern. Then break the pattern, Kade said. I am not those men, Meredith. I am not going to leave you at the altar or gamble away your future or cheat on you. That is not who I am. You cannot know that, Meredith protested. People always think they will be different. They always mean it when they make promises. But then life happens and the promises break. You are right, Kade admitted. I cannot give you guarantees. Nobody can, but I can promise to try. I can promise to be honest, to work at this, to not give up when things get hard. Is not that worth something? Meredith felt tears burning behind her eyes. She wanted so desperately to believe him, but belief felt like stepping off a cliff. I am scared, she whispered. I know, Kade said. I am scared too. I have not let myself care about anyone since Emma's mother died 8 years ago. I told myself it was easier that way, safer for both me and Emma. But then you arrived in town covered in dust from an outlaw attack, and you looked so determined to not let it defeat you, and I thought maybe I could be that brave too. That was not bravery, Meredith said. That was just survival. Sometimes they are the same thing. Kade moved closer, close enough that Meredith could feel the warmth of him. I am not asking you to jump into anything. I am just asking you to give us a chance. Dinner sometimes. Conversations. See where it goes. If I turn out to be another in your long line of disappointments, then you can add my name to the list, and I will leave you alone. But what if I am not? What if this time is different? Meredith looked up at him, at those storm-gray eyes that held nothing but sincerity. She had sworn she would not do this again, had promised herself that Alta would be different, that she would focus on her teaching and her independence. But Kade was looking at her like she was worth fighting for, and it had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way. One dinner, she heard herself say, just dinner, and we go slowly. Kade's face broke into a smile that transformed him completely. Slowly, I can do slowly. And if this goes badly, if you break my heart like all the others, I will never forgive you, Meredith warned. Fair enough, Kade agreed. And if you run away at the first sign of trouble, I will track you down and drag you back to talk it through. Despite everything, Meredith found herself smiling. That sounds ominous. That sounds like 2 people who are both scared and both willing to try anyway, Kade corrected. He held out his hand. Deal. Meredith looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then placed hers in it. His grip was warm and calloused and steady. Deal, she said softly. That first dinner turned into another, and then another. Kade courted her with a patience that both reassured and frustrated Meredith. He brought her flowers from the mountain meadows, shared books from his surprisingly extensive collection, and listened when she talked about her dreams of expanding the school's curriculum. He introduced her to his horses and taught her to rope fence posts. He made her laugh with stories about Emma's antics and his own mishaps learning to ranch after growing up in town. Emma, for her part, was delighted by the developing relationship. She made no secret of her hopes that Miss Ross might become more than just her teacher, though Kade gently cautioned her not to push. Meredith found herself growing genuinely fond of the girl, not just as a student but as a person. Emma was bright and funny and resilient, with her father's quiet strength and her own fierce independence. But even as Meredith felt herself falling for both of them, the fear remained. She waited for Kade to show his true colors, to reveal the flaw that would shatter everything. She looked for signs that he was losing interest, that his promises were empty. She held back parts of herself, keeping a distance even in moments of closeness. November brought heavy snow to Alta, and the school had to close for 3 days when the roads became impassable. Meredith was trapped at Mrs. Paulson's boarding house, restless and worried about her students. On the 3rd day, there was a knock at the door, and when Mrs. Paulson answered it, Kade stood there covered in snow. "Mr. Emerson," Mrs. Paulson exclaimed. "Good heavens, you should not be out in this weather." "I needed to check on Meredith," Kade said, stomping snow off his boots. "Make sure she was all right." Meredith appeared in the hallway, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "Kade, you rode all this way in a snowstorm just to check on me. The storm is breaking up," he said, as if that explained everything. "And yes, is that strange?" "It is foolish," Meredith said, but she could not keep the warmth from her voice. "You could have gotten lost or frozen." "I know these mountains," Kade assured her. "I have ridden them in worse storms than this. Besides, I promised Emma I would make sure you were safe. She has been worried." Mrs. Paulson, ever the romantic, insisted Kade come in for hot coffee and food before he rode back. As they sat in the parlor, warming up, Kade reached into his coat and pulled out a package wrapped in oilcloth. "Emma wanted me to bring you this," he said, handing it to Meredith. "She made it herself." Meredith unwrapped the package to find a small embroidered handkerchief with her initials in careful stitches. The work was uneven but clearly done with great care, and Meredith felt tears prick her eyes. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Tell her I love it." "You can tell her yourself when the road's clear," Kade said. "She is planning to make you Christmas presents, so act surprised when the time comes." They talked for a while, comfortable and easy despite Mrs. Paulson's obvious interest in their conversation. When Kade finally left to ride back before dark, Meredith stood at the window watching him go, and she felt the careful walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. The problem with walls, she was learning, was that they kept out pain, but they also kept out joy. And Kade Emerson was offering her something she had not had in a very long time: joy. Christmas came with a celebration at the school, and the whole town turned out. Meredith had helped the children prepare a small play, and Emma had the lead role. She performed beautifully, confident and clear-voiced, and Meredith saw tears of pride in Kade's eyes as he watched his daughter. After the play, there was food and dancing, and Kade asked Meredith to dance. She accepted, and as they moved together to the fiddle music, Meredith realized she was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way she had not been in years. It terrified her. "You are thinking too much again," Kade said quietly, guiding her through the steps. "I can see it on your face." "I am always thinking too much," Meredith admitted. "What about this time? About how happy I am? About how that scares me?" Kade pulled her a little closer, propriety stretching but not quite breaking. "What if you just let yourself be happy? What if you stop waiting for disaster and just enjoy this moment?" "I do not know if I remember how," Meredith confessed. "Then learn," Kade said simply. "I will help you." That night, after the celebration ended and Kade was walking Meredith back to Mrs. Paulson's, he stopped under a street lamp and turned to face her. "Meredith, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me." "All right," she said, suddenly nervous. "I love you," Kade said. "I have loved you for weeks now, maybe since that first day when you looked at me with dust on your face and determination in your eyes. I know you are scared, and I know I am asking a lot. But I love you, and I want a future with you. Not someday, not in some vague, distant time. I want you in my life, in Emma's life. I want to wake up next to you and work beside you and build something real and lasting." Meredith felt like she could not breathe. "Kade, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," he assured her. "I just needed you to know. I am not going anywhere, Meredith. I am not those other men. I will be here tomorrow and next week and next year. I promised to be the last man standing, and I meant it." "The last man standing," Meredith echoed. "You have had your heart broken too many times," Kade said. "So I am promising you that I will be the last one, the one who stays, the one who does not break you, the last man you will ever have to risk your heart on." Tears spilled down Meredith's cheeks. "You cannot promise that." "Watch me," Kade said. He cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I know you have been hurt. I know you have every reason not to trust this, but I am asking you to try. Be brave one more time. Let me prove that not all men are like the ones who hurt you. And if you are wrong, if this falls apart like everything else, then we will deal with it together," Kade said. "But I do not think I am wrong. I think we are something good, something real. Do you not feel it too?" "Yes," Meredith whispered. "Yes, I feel it, and it terrifies me." "Good," Kade said, and he leaned down and kissed her. It was not Meredith's first kiss, but it felt like it. Kade kissed her with tenderness and certainty, his hands gentle on her face, his lips warm against hers. It was a promise and a question all at once, and Meredith felt something inside her shift and settle. This was real. This was different. This could actually work. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said. "Not right now, not tonight. But stay with me, with us. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." "That is a proposal," Meredith said, her voice shaking. "Yes, it is. Is that all right?" Meredith thought about Charles, who had proposed with flowery words and then disappeared. She thought about William, who had never actually proposed at all, just assumed they would marry someday. She thought about Thomas, who had whispered promises he never meant to keep. And then she looked at Kade, solid and steady in here, and she made a choice. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Kade's face lit up with pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around right there on the snowy street, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, longer and deeper, and Meredith let herself fall into it without fear. They were married in March, when the spring thaw had begun but snow still capped the mountains. The ceremony was held in the school, with the whole town in attendance. Emma was Meredith's maid of honor, glowing with happiness. Mrs. Paulson wept through the entire ceremony. Mayor Hutchins officiated, beaming like a proud father. Meredith wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Paulson and Emma had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Kade wore his best suit and looked nervous and happy and impossibly handsome. When he took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "Meredith Ross, I promise to love you faithfully for all the days of my life. I promise to be honest, to work beside you, to protect you and honor you. I promise to be the last man standing, the one who stays, the one who proves that love can be real and lasting. I promise to make you happy." Meredith's own vows came from somewhere deep inside her, past all the old hurts and fears. "Kade Emerson, I promise to trust you, to believe in us, to stop waiting for disaster. I promise to be brave enough to love you completely. I promise to build a life and a family with you, to stand beside you in good times and hard times. I promise to let this be enough, because you are enough." When they kissed as husband and wife, the whole room erupted in cheers. Emma hugged them both, crying happy tears. Mrs. Paulson dabbed at her eyes, and Meredith felt something she had not felt in years: peace. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and dancing and toasts that ranged from sentimental to hilariously improper. Meredith danced with her new husband, with Emma, with nearly every man in town. Kade never took his eyes off her, and every time their gazes met across the room, Meredith felt her heart swell with something that felt dangerously like perfect happiness. Later, when they finally escaped to the ranch that was now her home, Emma staying with a friend to give them privacy, Kade carried Meredith over the threshold and set her down gently in the front room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Emerson," he said softly. "Mrs. Emerson," Meredith repeated, testing out the name. "That will take some getting used to." "You have the rest of your life to practice," Kade said. He pulled her close, his arms around her waist. "No regrets." "None," Meredith said, and she meant it. "Though you realize you have set yourself an impossible standard, the last man standing, that is quite a promise." "I will spend every day keeping it," Kade assured her. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You deserve someone who keeps their promises." "I have that now," Meredith said, and she finally, fully believed it. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, with none of the awkwardness Meredith had feared. Kade was patient and attentive, making her feel cherished and desired. They talked and laughed and loved, and when Meredith finally fell asleep in her husband's arms, she did not dream of old heartbreaks. She dreamed of the future. Morning came bright and clear, and Meredith woke to find Kade already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. She wrapped herself in a robe and padded downstairs, smiling at the domestic scene. This was her life now. This was real. "Good morning, wife," Kade said, grinning at her. "Good morning, husband," Meredith replied, and the word felt like magic on her tongue. Emma came home that afternoon, bursting with excitement and questions. Meredith had worried that Emma might feel displaced or jealous, but the girl seemed nothing but thrilled to have Meredith as her stepmother. She had even started calling Meredith Ma occasionally, though she always looked shy about it, as if asking permission. "You can call me whatever you are comfortable with," Meredith assured her. "Ma, Meredith, mother, whatever feels right." "I think Ma," Emma decided. "Because you are my ma now, right? That is how it works when people get married." "That is exactly how it works," Meredith confirmed, hugging the girl close. The spring turned into summer, and Meredith split her time between teaching and helping run the ranch. She discovered she enjoyed the physical work of ranching, the way it tired her body but cleared her mind. Kade taught her more about riding and roping, about reading the weather and understanding the cattle. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. The town had grown to love Meredith, and she had grown to love them back. She expanded the school's curriculum, adding more advanced mathematics and literature. She started a lending library in the schoolhouse, bringing education to adults as well as children. She became part of the fabric of Alta, no longer the outsider from the East but a valued member of the community. But the real joy was at home. Kade was everything he had promised to be: faithful, hardworking, honest to a fault. He never gave Meredith reason to doubt him. When they disagreed, which was inevitable, he talked it through rather than shutting down or walking away. When she had moments of old fear, when the past tried to creep back in, he held her and reminded her that he was not going anywhere. "You are stuck with me," he would say, kissing her temple. "For better or worse, remember." "I remember," Meredith would reply, and each time it got easier to believe. In August, Meredith realized she was pregnant. The discovery left her simultaneously thrilled and terrified. She had never really imagined herself as a mother, had not let herself hope for that kind of future. But now it was happening, and she felt completely unprepared. She told Kade that evening, blurting it out while they were doing dishes after dinner. "I am pregnant." Kade froze, a plate in his hands, water dripping. "You are?" "Yes." I know we did not really discuss it, and maybe it is too soon, and I am scared. But I am also happy, I think." And Kade set the plate down carefully and pulled Meredith into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You are happy?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I think so. Are you?" "Meredith, I am thrilled. I am terrified and thrilled, and thank you for this." They stood in the kitchen holding each other while the dishwater grew cold, both of them crying and laughing. Emma, who had been reading in the next room, came to investigate the noise and was ecstatic when they told her. She immediately started planning all the things she would teach her new sibling, and Meredith marveled at how full her life had become. The pregnancy was easier than Meredith had feared, though she got tired quickly, and the mountain altitude sometimes made her dizzy. Kade was attentive to the point of being overprotective, and Meredith had to remind him repeatedly that she was pregnant, not fragile. "I am still teaching," she said firmly when he suggested she take time off. "The children need me, and I need the routine." "At least let me drive you to town," Kade insisted. "No more riding horseback. That compromise Meredith could accept." So every morning, Kade drove her into Alta in the wagon and picked her up each afternoon. Sometimes Emma came along, proud to be part of caring for Meredith. As her belly grew, Meredith found herself thinking about her own mother, wishing she could share this experience with her. She wrote long letters home to Chicago, describing her life in Alta, her husband, her stepdaughter, the baby to come. Her mother's responses were stilted at first, still hurt that Meredith had left so abruptly, but they gradually warmed. By the time Meredith was 7 months along, her mother had sent baby clothes she had knitted herself, and Meredith wept over the tiny soft garments. "She is trying," Kade said, reading over Meredith's shoulder. "That is good." "I was so angry at her for so long," Meredith admitted. "For pushing me toward the wrong men, for not understanding why I needed to leave. But maybe she was doing the best she could." "Most people are," Kade said. "That is all any of us can do." The baby came in late March, almost exactly a year after Meredith and Kade had married. It was a long labor, and Meredith was exhausted and scared, but Kade stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. Emma waited anxiously downstairs with Mrs. Paulson, who had come to help with the birth. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, the baby arrived, a boy with a powerful set of lungs and a shock of dark hair like his father. "A son," the midwife announced, cleaning him and wrapping him in blankets. "Healthy and strong." Kade held his son with the same careful reverence he showed for everything precious, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. Meredith, he is perfect." Meredith, exhausted and sore and happier than she had ever been, reached for her husband and her son. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at the tiny face, Meredith knew. "James," she said, "after your father." Kade looked at her with such love it took her breath away. "James, yes, James Emerson." Emma was allowed to come up once Meredith was cleaned up and resting, and she approached the bed with wide eyes, staring at her baby brother. "He is so small," she whispered. "You were once this small too," Kade told her. "Hard to believe, right? Can I hold him?" Emma asked, and at Meredith's nod, Kade carefully placed James in his daughter's arms, showing her how to support his head. Emma looked down at her brother with such pure love that Meredith felt fresh tears. "I am going to teach him everything," Emma declared. "Riding and reading and how to catch fish in the creek. When he is a bit older," Meredith said, laughing. "For now, he mostly needs to eat and sleep." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Meredith had never been happier. Kade was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with a crying baby without complaint. Emma was a surprisingly helpful big sister, entertaining James with silly faces and songs when he was fussy. The school year had ended before James was born, giving Meredith time to recover and adjust to motherhood. She had arranged for a temporary replacement teacher for the fall, planning to return part-time once James was older. But as summer turned to autumn, she found she was not ready to be away from her son for long hours yet. "I feel guilty," she confessed to Kade one evening as they sat on the porch watching Emma play with James on a blanket. "The children need a teacher." "They have a teacher," Kade reminded her. "And you will go back when you are ready. There is no rush, Meredith. You do not have to prove anything." "I am not trying to prove anything," Meredith protested, but she knew it was not entirely true. Part of her was still that woman who had arrived in Alta broken and determined to stand on her own, to need nothing from anyone. "You have already proved everything that matters," Kade said. "You are an excellent teacher, a wonderful mother, an amazing wife. Taking time to be with our son does not diminish any of that. When did you become so wise?" Meredith asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I have always been wise," Kade said with mock seriousness. "You just did not notice." Meredith laughed and elbowed him gently, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains. She did eventually return to teaching, starting with just 3 days a week when James was 6 months old. Mrs. Paulson was happy to watch him, and Meredith found she had missed the classroom more than she realized. But now her life had balance. She was not running from anything anymore. She was running towards something. A future with Kade and Emma and James, a life filled with purpose and love. 2 years passed in a rhythm of seasons and small joys. Emma grew into a confident young woman, excelling at school and helping around the ranch. James learned to walk and talk, a bright, curious child who adored his big sister. The ranch prospered, and Kade expanded their herd and bought more land. Meredith became one of the most respected women in Alta, known for her teaching and her community involvement. And through it all, Kade kept his promise. He was there every morning and every night. He was patient during disagreements and passionate during reconciliations. He never strayed, never lied, never gave Meredith reason to doubt. He was, quite simply, the last man standing. One evening in early spring, Meredith stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while Kade came in from checking the cattle. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, nuzzling her neck. "I have been thinking," he said. "That is always dangerous," Meredith teased. "I have been thinking about how lucky I am. How different my life could have been if that stage had not been attacked 3 years ago, if I had not been there to help defend it, if you had not come to Alta." Meredith turned in his arms to face him. "I think about that too sometimes, about how close I came to not taking this job, to staying in Chicago and marrying boring Mr. Patterson like my mother wanted." "I am very glad you did not marry boring Mr. Patterson," Kade said seriously. "Because then I would not have you. And I would not have this," Meredith said, gesturing around at the house, the life they had built. "I would not have Emma or James. I would not have learned that love does not always have to hurt." "Does it ever still scare you?" Kade asked. "Are you ever still waiting for disaster?" Meredith considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. Old habits are hard to break, but less and less. You have taught me to trust, Kade. That is not a small thing." "You taught me to hope again," Kade replied. "After Emma's mother died, I thought that was it for me. One great love and then just survival and duty. But then you showed up, and I learned that the heart is bigger than I thought. There is room for more than one love in a lifetime." "I think that is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me," Meredith said softly. "I have been saving it up," Kade admitted. He kissed her, slow and sweet. "I love you, Meredith Emerson, today and every day." I love you too, Meredith replied. My last man standing. They were interrupted by James toddling into the kitchen, demanding attention, and Emma following behind, laughing at her brother's antics. The moment of romance passed, replaced by the cheerful chaos of family life, but Meredith did not mind. This was better than romance. This was real. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Meredith and Kade lay in bed talking about their dreams for the future. They wanted to expand the school, maybe add a second room. They wanted more cattle, perhaps some sheep. They talked about Emma's education, about whether she might want to attend university someday. They talked about James and what kind of man he might become. You ever regret leaving your old life behind? Kade asked. Chicago, the culture, the opportunities. Never, Meredith said firmly. That life was full of things that looked good on the outside but were empty inside. This life is real. It matters. I matter here, not just as a pretty face or a good marriage prospect, but as myself. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Good, Kade said, pulling her close. Because I am not letting you go. I know, Meredith said. You promised you would be the last man standing, remember? I am holding you to that. Forever, Kade confirmed. You are stuck with me forever. Forever sounds about right, Meredith agreed, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The seasons continued their turn. Emma grew and eventually did go off to university in Salt Lake City, though she came home every summer to help on the ranch. James grew into a sturdy boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's quick mind. Meredith taught generations of Alta's children, watching them grow and start families of their own. Kade expanded the ranch into one of the most successful in the valley, but he never let work consume him. Family came first always. They had another child, a daughter they named Sarah after Kade's mother, when Meredith was 31. Sarah was bold and adventurous from birth, giving her parents gray hairs with her fearless exploration of the ranch. Then, 3 years later, another son named Thomas, who was gentle and artistic, more interested in drawing than in cattle. The house was full and loud and chaotic, and Meredith loved every minute of it. This was the family she had never imagined she could have, the love she had stopped believing in. Kade had kept his promise. He had stayed. He had been faithful and true and constant. He had been the last man standing. On their 10th anniversary, Kade surprised Meredith with a trip back east. Mrs. Paulson and Emma, now 19 and capable, agreed to watch the younger children, and Kade and Meredith took the train to Chicago. Meredith had not been back since she left, and she was nervous about seeing her mother again after so many years. But the reunion was warm. Meredith's mother was older, grayer, but her eyes lit up when she saw her daughter. She embraced Meredith tightly, then turned to Kade and took his hands in hers. "Thank you," she said simply, "for making my daughter happy, for being the man she needed." "She makes it easy," Kade replied. They spent a week in Chicago, visiting old haunts and seeing old friends. Meredith introduced Kade to the city she had grown up in, showing him the parks and museums and theaters. But as wonderful as it was to visit, Meredith was eager to return home. Chicago felt like someone else's life now. Alta was where she belonged. On the train ride back, Meredith rested her head on Kade's shoulder and reflected on how far she had come. 10 years ago, she had been running, broken and afraid. Now she was whole, healed by time and love and the steady presence of a man who kept his promises. "What are you thinking about?" Kade asked, stroking her hair. "About how wrong I was," Meredith said. "About men, about love, about myself. I thought I was broken beyond repair, but I was not broken, just hurt, and you helped me heal." "We helped each other heal," Kade corrected. "I was pretty lost too before you came along." "We are quite a pair," Meredith said, smiling. The best pair, Kade agreed. They arrived back in Alta to find their children healthy and happy, the ranch running smoothly, and spring beginning to bloom across the mountain valley. Meredith slipped back into her routine with relief and joy. Teaching the children, working in her garden, helping Kade with the horses, playing with her children in the evenings. This was her life, and it was everything. The years continued to pass, each one building on the last. Emma married a kind young man named David, who took over managing the ranch with Kade. James went to university and became a teacher like his mother. Sarah married a mining engineer and moved to Colorado but visited often. Thomas surprised everyone by becoming a successful artist, selling his paintings of Western landscapes to collectors back east. Meredith and Kade grew older together, their hair graying, their movements slowing, but their love never diminishing. They had weathered illnesses and financial setbacks and the normal trials of life, but they had weathered them together. Kade had never wavered, never strayed, never broken his promise. He had been the last man standing, just as he swore he would be. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house overflowed with family, with noise and laughter and love. Meredith stood on the porch watching her grandchildren play in the yard, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Kade came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What do you think?" he asked. "Not bad for a woman who thought she was too broken to love. Not bad for a cowboy who promised to be the last man standing," Meredith replied. She turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Thank you, Kade, for keeping your promise, for staying, for loving me even when I made it difficult." "It was never difficult," Kade said. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." "Liar," Meredith said fondly. "I was prickly and scared and held back for the longest time." "But worth it," Kade insisted. "Every moment was worth it." They kissed, long and sweet, while their family pretended not to watch and their grandchildren giggled. When they pulled apart, Emma called everyone in for dinner, and the celebration continued long into the evening. Later, when the guests had finally gone home and the house was quiet, Meredith and Kade sat on their porch watching the stars come out over the mountains. It was the same porch where they had shared so many evenings, where they had talked about dreams and fears and hopes for the future. "You remember that first dinner I came here?" Meredith asked. "When Emma invited me and I was so nervous." "I remember," Kade said. "I burned the roast because I was distracted by how beautiful you looked." "You did not burn the roast," Meredith protested. "Maybe a little," Kade admitted. "I was terrified you would say no if I asked you out again. I had been alone so long, and suddenly there you were, and I wanted so badly not to mess it up." "You did not mess it up," Meredith assured him. "You did everything exactly right. You were patient when I was scared. You were steady when I was uncertain. You loved me when I did not think I could be loved anymore." "Of course you could be loved," Kade said firmly. "You are remarkable, Meredith. You always were. Those other men were fools not to see it." "Maybe they were not ready," Meredith said thoughtfully. "Maybe I was not ready either, not really. Maybe we all had to become who we needed to be before we could find our way to each other." "That is very philosophical," Kade teased. "I am old and wise now," Meredith said with dignity. "I am allowed to be philosophical." "You are 51, Kade pointed out. "That is not old." "It is older than I ever thought I would be," Meredith admitted. "There were times before Alta, before you, when I wondered if I would even make it this far. I was so lost, so convinced I was doing something wrong." "You were not doing anything wrong," Kade said. "You just had not found the right place yet, had not found me yet." "My last man standing," Meredith said softly, the phrase that had become their private joke, their promise, their truth. "Always," Kade confirmed. Until my last breath, I will be standing beside you." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars wheel overhead. The air was cool and fresh with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The mountains stood eternal and unchanging around them. Meredith thought about the woman she had been when she first came to Alta, afraid and defensive, convinced that love was just another word for eventual pain. She thought about how Kade had slowly, patiently proved her wrong. How he had shown her that love could be steady and true. How he had been exactly what he promised, the last man standing. "I should probably confess something," Kade said suddenly. Meredith turned to look at him, curious. "What is that?" "That day the stage was attacked when I first saw you. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Most people would have panicked, but you just got angry. You looked like you were furious at those outlaws for inconveniencing you, and I thought, that is a woman worth knowing." "I was not being brave," Meredith said. "I was just tired. Tired of things going wrong, tired of life being hard. I was so ready to just give up." "But you did not give up," Kade pointed out. "You kept going. You came to Alta, you started teaching, you built a life. And then you took a chance on me, even though you were scared. That is brave, Meredith. That is the definition of brave." "We were both brave," Meredith said. "You lost your wife, raised Emma alone, built this ranch from nothing. And then you opened your heart again, even though you must have been scared too." "Terrified," Kade admitted, "but you were worth the risk." "You have always been worth the risk." They went to bed eventually, climbing the stairs to the room they had shared for 25 years. The house creaked and settled around them, familiar and beloved. Meredith thought about all the nights they had spent in this room, talking and loving and simply being together. Thousands of nights, and each one precious. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness as they lay side by side. "For what?" Kade asked. "For being exactly who you promised to be. For keeping your word. For loving me even when I did not make it easy." "Meredith, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life," Kade said seriously. "I mean that. You and Emma and our children, you are everything. You are why I get up in the morning and why I thank God every night. You are my heart." "And you are mine," Meredith replied. "My heart, my home, my last man standing." "Forever," Kade promised, as he had promised 25 years ago, as he would promise every day for the rest of their lives. "Forever," Meredith agreed, and she fell asleep in her husband's arms, completely at peace. The years continued to unfold, each one a gift. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays, always surrounded by family. They dealt with the challenges that came with age, the aches and pains and slowing down, but they dealt with them together. They watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own, extending the family tree in beautiful, unexpected directions. Meredith eventually retired from teaching at 60, though she continued to tutor students who needed extra help. Kade handed over most of the ranch work to Emma and David, though he still rode out to check the cattle most mornings. They traveled a bit, visiting their children in their various homes, but they always came back to Alta, to the ranch, to the place where they had built their life together. One evening, when Meredith was 68 and Kade was 70, they sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. It was early summer, the air warm and sweet, the mountains green with new growth. They had been married for 43 years, and Meredith could honestly say she loved him more now than she had on their wedding day. "You ever think about that first day?" she asked. "When the stage was attacked and you defended us?" "Sometimes," Kade admitted. "I think about how easily it could have gone differently. If I had not been on that road, if the outlaws had been better shots, if you had taken a different stage. We almost never met, Meredith. That terrifies me." "But we did meet," Meredith said firmly, "and you kept your promise. You were the last man standing." "I will always be the last man standing," Kade assured her. "That is a promise I will keep until I die." "You had better," Meredith said, trying for levity but hearing the emotion in her own voice. "Because I am counting on you. I have been counting on you for 43 years and I am not stopping now." "Good," Kade said, pulling her close, "because I am not going anywhere." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was the same view they had watched thousands of times, and it never got old. Nothing about their life together had gotten old. Every day was still a gift, still a choice to love and be loved. "I was thinking," Kade said after a long, comfortable silence, "we should have a party, a big one for our 45th anniversary. Invite everyone, all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Make it a real celebration." "That is 2 years away," Meredith pointed out. "I know. But it gives us something to look forward to, and I want to celebrate, Meredith. I want to celebrate us, this life we built, the family we created. I want everyone to know how proud I am to be your husband." "They already know," Meredith said, but she was smiling. "But yes, let us have a party. A huge, wonderful, ridiculous party where we celebrate the fact that we made it. Against all odds, we made it. We did make it," Kade agreed, "and we are still making it. Every day." 2 years later, on a perfect June day, they had that party. The ranch overflowed with family and friends, with food and music and laughter. 4 generations of Emersons gathered to celebrate Kade and Meredith's 45 years of marriage, and it was glorious. Meredith looked around at all the faces, at the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who existed, because she had been brave enough to take a chance 45 years ago. Because she had let Kade prove that love did not have to hurt. Because he had been the last man standing. Emma, now 64 herself and a grandmother many times over, raised a glass to toast her father and stepmother. "To Kade and Meredith," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd, "who taught all of us what love really means. Not just romance or passion, though they certainly had that, but commitment, showing up every day even when it is hard, choosing each other again and again. Pa, you kept your promise to Ma. You were the last man standing. And Ma, you were brave enough to let him. Thank you both for showing us what a marriage should be." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as everyone raised their glasses. Kade stood and pulled Meredith to her feet, kissing her soundly while everyone cheered. "Here is to 45 more years," someone shouted, and everyone laughed because they all knew that was unlikely at their ages. But Meredith did not care about the number of years. She had had enough, more than enough. She had had a lifetime of love, of faithfulness, of promises kept. She had learned that hearts could heal, that trust could be rebuilt, that love did not have to end in pain. Kade had promised to be the last man standing, and he had been. He was standing beside her now, holding her hand, looking at her with the same love he had shown for 45 years. And Meredith knew with absolute certainty that he would keep standing beside her until the very end. That was enough. That was everything. The party went on late into the evening, but eventually people began to leave. Children and grandchildren hugged them goodbye, promising to visit soon. Finally, it was just Kade and Meredith again, standing on their porch as they had done countless times before. "Thank you," Kade said quietly, "for saying yes all those years ago, for taking a chance on me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for asking," Meredith replied. "For seeing past my fear, for being patient, for keeping your promise." "Always," Kade said. "I will always keep my promise. You are my heart, Meredith, my last and greatest love. And you are mine," Meredith said, "my last man standing." They stood together under the stars, Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The mountains stood eternal around them, the same mountains that had watched over their love story from the beginning. And Meredith knew, with the wisdom of 70 years and 45 years of marriage, that some promises really were forever. Kade had promised to be the last man standing, and he had kept that promise every single day. And Meredith, who had thought her heart was too broken to love again, had found the courage to believe in him. Together, they had created not just a marriage but a legacy, a family, a love story for the ages. And that, Meredith thought as she stood in her husband's arms under the vast western sky, was the greatest gift of all. Not just that she had loved and been loved, but that she had been brave enough to try one more time. That she had let Kade be the last man standing, and in doing so had finally found her home. The end.